very simple. With coordination with NATO, NATO comes, provides full air cover, bombardments of our troops. We withdraw to protect our volunteers and our armed forces. The armed rebels move in a town. The most important thing for them is to announce it and have some cameras film them in that particular town. NATO stops bombing. Within a few hours, we move back, we take the town. This is how pathetic they are. Yes, indeed, I have said before that the rebels do make land advances, but they retreat and they are defeated immediately once NATO stops bombardment. And this is because, I need you to understand this, we are not fighting just with the armed forces of Libya. We are fighting with thousands upon thousands of volunteers from the local tribes of the Western Mountain. And that's why the rebels will never win. They will never win. Al-Ghzaya, they came down from the mountain, and this was a very unfortunate act that they did. We hold Sarkozy responsible for the death of almost 200 of the rebels. The story is as following. Sarkozy is so desperate because he is defeated politically in France because of the Libyan crisis. He issued his command to the rebels that they need to gain land and go down the mountain and especially capture the city of Garian so he can appear victorious to the French and achieve some political victory there. The rebels, of course, were not prepared, but they had to do it because Sarkozy conditioned them that if they did not do that, he will stop any support, any funding, any weapons of any kind to them. So he pushed our kids to go on a war that they cannot win. They came down the mountain, they exposed themselves. Our army waited until NATO stopped bombardment. Within 1 hour, we started shelling them with rockets and bullets, and unfortunately, we killed, the number is 190 between yesterday and the day before yesterday. In 2 days, 190. So Sarkozy and NATO keep causing the death of many Libyans by convincing them that they can win this war, while in fact, they cannot. Remember, we are under sea embargo, no-fly zone, heavy NATO bombardment, diplomatic embargo. We cannot import fuel. The whole, if you like, Western world is against us. The rebels are supported by weapons, funds, fuel, air cover, rockets, bombs. And for how long? More than 4 months now. And they cannot do anything. They're not even threatening us. You go to Tripoli, you see people swimming in the sea. Our universities are open, our schools are open, hospitals are open, factories. What does this tell you? Two things. That once, the rebels don't have a real popular support, otherwise they would have achieved something. Secondly, they are very bad in military terms. They are not experienced, they cannot defeat our professional army, and they cannot defeat our volunteers who are in the thousands. So the West need to understand, and you as journalists, you need to understand, we will not lose this war. We are victorious. This is our land. We will win because we are here. We are one, united, and this is our land. And NATO is exhausting itself. It needs to stop and come down and talk to us. And we will be able to find a political solution without preconditions. 600 of the rebels died on the gates of Al-Brega. I mentioned this before. 600 in 5 days. It's a massacre. And this is one of the reasons Abdel Fattah was killed. Al-Qaeda lost 200 fighters in Al-Brega only. 200 within 5 days. So the world, starting from you, my friends, the journalists, you need to wake up. You need to stand back and watch the full picture. And you have to ask yourselves, how could an isolated tyrant, dictatorship, isolated, hated by its population, how could it remain resilient and victorious under such worldwide pressure? You have to remember that we have the whole Western world against us. Qatar and Emirates are funding the rebels with billions. The weapons are coming from air and through the borders to the rebels. How is it? I mean, we don't have the invisible soldiers fighting with us. We don't have monsters fighting with us. It's because the people are with us. And it's because these rebels are the few and they do not have popular support. And because this is our country and our land. And because this is just a minority armed rebellion that should have been crushed with the help of the international community. It's very weird that the international community, so-called international community, is helping an armed gang to gain hold of a whole country. It's unheard of. And the British acknowledgement or recognition of the Council of Benghazi is against all international law, international agreements. And it's a nice slap to the face to the British that the council that they recognize could not protect its own commander of the army. This is the answer Mr. Haig was asking for. This is the answer Mr. Cameron was asking for. He put his trust in the council, and the following day, the commander-in-chief of the army was killed by members of the same council. We are the legitimate government. We have the experts, we have the will, we have the power, we have the population, we have the oil, we have the legitimacy, we have the moral standards. The world needs to wake up. This is my final saying to you. As you remember, yes, I said what happened in our meetings with some of the officials from the opposition in the East. Would I put General Yunus in that camp? Yes, yes, especially him, yes. They understood, especially after the mass rallies that have taken place in many Libyan cities, never play down the importance of these mass rallies. They were the biggest in the history of the country. And remember, Libya is a country of 6 million. To have these people come out in these numbers is unheard of. They understood that, yes, indeed, in a political solution to the Libyan crisis, they will never win because they are regarded by the vast majority of Libyans as traitors who brought NATO into Libya and who caused the death of thousands of Libyans. Even many, by the way, even many people from the opposition who were talking about the crimes of the Libyan government, they are now starting to forget about the so-called crimes of the Libyan government because they are so covered now with the crimes of the oppositions, of the total chaos and violence that wrecked the country. Libya was a safe haven for every Libyan for decades. Yes, people had demands. They wanted reform. They wanted a constitution, better housing, better salaries, freedom of press. But what a difference between living a comfortable, nice life, secure in your home, secure in your school, secure in your university, your wife is secure, your daughter is secure, and you have demands. What a difference between this and having your whole life wrecked. Your kid killed, your daughter raped, you cannot sleep safely in your own house, you don't know what your future is. Democracy is not achieved through violence. Democracy is a long process of dialogue, gradual change without foreign agenda, and pushing forward. And we were doing that in Libya. This is one of the reasons I came back to this country, to actually help in the modernizing of the media. And we started this. And when I came back almost a year and a half ago, I found people before me modernizing Libyan media, satellite channels, newspapers, magazines, websites, and I joined them and I saw with my own eyes how this was happening. Yes, some people were complaining that the rhythm was slow, that we needed to move faster, but is this the rhythm they want? The rhythm of death and destruction and foreign involvement? And so we call for people. Everything can be done in Libya. We can have reform, we can move forward, we can have a political system that includes everyone. We can do everything, but we need to come back to the legitimacy of the Libyan national government, help make Libya one, and move forward, and not get NATO and the West involved. I mean, since when NATO is interested in democracy? Since when is France interested in democracy around the world? We know France's history in North Africa, and we know Italy's history in North Africa, and we know Britain's history in North Africa. The people who suffered from these countries are still alive, and we are people of memory. We do remember. We do remember. We have our culture. Okay, thank you very much for listening, and not many questions. Good enough for me.